Well, good morning. Saturdays and EVs. Today is my Saturday, and I'm working on my EV. Actually, I'm working on my Kostov motor. It's 11-inch interpole motor, and we need to replace some brushes. I bought some new parts from Kostov. Brand new motor brush ring. It's removable. It's also adjustable. And this happens to be the old one, and the old one is dirty, but it's still usable. And I'm not sure if I'm going to swap just the brushes and springs or actually change the whole thing. I think I can get away with maybe putting the new ring on. The new ring has mounting holes in a different position. It's a 180. It's about a 180 out from the old, but it is still for this particular motor, so it will work. Not a problem. And found that I had some really bad springs and some really bad brushes, and that's what I'm fixing. So get our hands all black and yucky. That's okay. But I needed to take this particular motor apart. I had it running at one point, but found that the brushes were literally falling apart. But the wires that go into the top of the brushes literally just came out of the brush. Not sure if you can see that in here or not, but they just literally came out. Apparently it had been wagging around inside this thing, and just didn't hold up. And so I'm thinking of using the new ring and getting everything in. Everything's brand new, all the brush springs, all that kind of stuff. One of the things I found is a couple of the brush springs not only were corroding away, but a couple of the brush springs actually had lost their spring. So it wasn't pushing down on these, and these brushes that came out of the motor are all at weird angles, so the brushes were not being pushed in properly, and you can see some wear on the edges of the brush that was in the holder where it was slamming and bouncing around loose because the spring wasn't holding the brush properly and without much pressure. So these things were just slamming and rattling around. This motor used to be in a Chevy S10 Blazer. Used to drive on the freeway, all that stuff. I picked up the motor because the Blazer was decommissioned and taken apart and sold off for parts, and somebody else bought all the batteries. I bought the motor. The light brushing here will do just fine. The comb looks like it's in really good shape. Bearings feel good, and the person who had this, or somebody at one point, modified this a little bit. And typically on a brush ring, on the inside, you have one skinny wire, because you got two brushes, so one spans two, and then this one connects to this one. And usually with just a thin heavy gauge wire, not thin heavy gauge, it's a heavy gauge, it's a heavy single wire, not a big flat plate like some may have. But this motor here is rated at 144 and 192 volts. And what the person did is they took two more heavy gauge wire. Kind of hard to see it from here. I'll show some close up. Took some heavy gauge wire and made a whole nother connection. So now instead of just one wire spanning two of the brush rings, we now have 3 heavy gauge wires spanning each one of these things to increase the ability for it to transfer power around the brush spring to the other set of brushes on the other side. And I thought that was an interesting thing, and I'd never seen that, and I never noticed it before. So we have the motor up here. I blew the motor out, got all the carbon dust out of it. Everything looks good, nothing looks falling apart, nothing looks burnt. And so I'm going to take the old brush ring off. We're going to put the new brush ring on, and then we're going to get this motor, and we're going to get it on 12 volts and let it break in. This particular motor, unlike the warp motors, the brushes are just straight into the comp. They're not angled off at an angle. And that's just how they made these motors, and that's what we're going to use. It's definitely not in the class of a warp motor, but it's what I got, and I got them for a reasonably decent price. And so I have another motor. This motor here is a good known motor. The other one I have is a good known motor, and I'm going to clean up the one brush ring, order some new brushes, and put one of these motors together and probably put it up for sale. This particular motor we're going to actually put in the car, so we're going to keep this one here, get the other one running, get it up for sale for somebody so they can have it a decent motor at a reasonable price. And that way you can have some good power, good torque. Not a high-speed motor, so you need to get a torque or a RPM limiter for it to keep the RPMs down. So about 4,800 RPM. I wouldn't go much more than that. They are wrapped in Kevlar banding. Both motors are. So it'll handle bit. So anyway, let's cracking on this particular job. So I'm just going to double check. Not seeing any real bad stuff here at all, and so we're just going to keep it at that, and I'm going to transfer these wires across to here and make ourselves a nice motor. The other thing I noticed too is on the new brush ring, the holders are made out of aluminum and not copper. I guess give a little bit more lightweight. Not sure why they chose that. But one of the brush rings I have in the old motor that got removed, the copper pieces that are holding the brushes actually got bent. Somebody bent a couple of them, and they just, you just can't, once they're bent, you can't get them back into shape. And I'm not going to bother to try. And, I don't think I want to bother trying to use the little wires here to add to it. I'd like to have a big flat bar, but the way this guy modified this, for me, it'll work just fine. And then the bar cross connecting the two terminals together, they used steel, and so I need to fabricate a copper bar and put a bigger copper bar there. None of the post connections are large like the other motors. It's not designed for a super high amperage motor, and we're not going to put a lot of high amps to it. Should handle up to 800 amps, no problem. But we're not gonna cook this puppy and and put it into a race mode type situation. So here's the new brush ring. So we've got aluminum, brand new springs, everything's connected up, but you can see the little wires here that connect from one side to the other. This modification added 2 more wires per, and that way it allows more transfer of power across. You can see, bring this up a little bit here. The cables coming out of the motor are pretty good size connections, good size cables. And what I was talking about earlier are these brushes here, and literally the cable just came right out of the brush. Just bing, it just came right out. But the angle of these is pretty lousy. There's a bit of wear right on this part of the brush. It'd be easier to see it in person, but trust me, there is, and not a good thing. And here's another brush with both the wires that just fell out, so it was in bad need of doing this. It looked like somebody else had also, when they took the whole thing apart, is on here you can see the spring is wound really tight around this little piece right here. And when I took the springs off of the other side, they weren't wound nearly as tight. You can even see on this one it's not wound nearly as tight, and so therefore doesn't put as much pressure onto the brush. And, but when I pulled these off, there was a couple of them that were just really nasty. This is the nasty one here. You can see, looking at the side, one spring's down more than the other, so it's lost its spring. It's also corroded away at the point where it's on the brush, and it actually, looking at it, looks like it was arcing out and wasn't holding those brushes in very well, and definitely not under a lot of tension like the new ones are. So wanted to show that to you, and I'm going to open this box up here for the terminal connections from inside the motor to the top terminal connections up here. So this is the motor. It's got a reasonably clean com, and we'll see what we can do. Get this thing back together again here real quick. And we'll let you check it out here once we get it running. So today's another one of those wonderful days. We had 93 degrees a couple days ago, and now we have cold 64 degrees and raining. So we go from winter to full-blown summer to winter again. So we're just kind of, that's why they call it spring. Spring back and forth, back and forth. Eventually we'll get to summer. Usually it just goes from winter to summer and no bouncing back. At least here. So let me get everything cleaned up and we'll get back. Okay, got our ring done. I put the other end plate. That's what this ring was for. So apparently they have a couple different rings, so you need to let them know which one you have if you order a new ring, if you happen to have an old Kostov motor. Otherwise, not to worry. So now we have three 3 wires. You can see here a little bit better. I'll do a close-up here of the 3 wires now going around from one brush to the opposite brush. Instead of just one little wire, we have now 3. Gives it a little bit better conductivity, better able to move some electrons. So we're going to get ready and put this little guy back together again. And I do need to this motor up on its end a little bit here, so this end is a little higher. So I can use this to lift it up. So I have two big bars here that I have to mount up to my the brushes. And once I do that, then we'll be all set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you a close-up of the inside of this thing the best I can. I'll show you. This armature definitely looks much larger, considerably larger than a warp 9 armature. It's an 11-inch motor. It does have interpoles in it. The actual fields may not be as thick and big and robust, but it does have interpoles, and there's a lot of copper in this thing. So I'll give you a real quick peek here. It's my neighbor across the way with the forklift noise. They're working on a fence. Anyway, just wanted to kind of give you an inside look. So I got to get these little guys hooked up to the brushes. And so you can see the Kevlar banding, and there's Kevlar banding on the other side. There is no banding in the center. The center is fairly narrow. This is a short motor. It's not a really long motor like a warp motor is, and that's okay. It's mostly a motor for torque, and we're going to see how well it works. I do have a warp 9 in the garage, in case I decide I don't want to mess with the Kostov motor, and we can go to a warp motor instead. But here I wanted to show you here's the brushes right here. Here's the 2 extra wires. So here's the 1 wire that's built in, just like these ones are built in. These are the 2 extra ones. These are heavy wire. It's not fine wire. It's heavy wire. It's really stiff and just formed. And runs extra around there, and it should work just fine. And I like the idea. I thought about the idea. I thought about the idea of actually running more from outside, but this will work just fine. It adds a little bit more without a lot of complications, and everything fit fine. The brush ring was a little tight fit. It is a brand new brush ring, so that could be part of the reason. The older style may have just been a really minute fuzz difference. And so again, here is one of the brush. Here again is one of the brushes where everything just kind of fell apart. I'm not sure if you can see the wear, that wear pattern on this brush right around here, and it too had this just pop out. So this is one thing you have to watch out for when you're running your motor, is do you have any brushes, you know, because when that was in here and everything was bolted up, you couldn't tell that that was loose, not until you took everything apart and put some pressure on there. So this is rocking and rolling in there, arcing around in there inside of here, and that's not a, it's not a good thing. So trying to keep everything in the camera zone here. So just wanted to give you a close-up of the brush for the Kostov. So it's just a square brush. It's flat square against the commutator. It's not angled like the warp motors. I'm back. We have a nice put back together motor. Brushes, brush ring. A few things were a little bit tight that I had to finagle a little bit. Tends to be the case, but just wanted to let you know, don't let anybody tell you that working on an electric car is clean. Oh my. All this black carbon, it's just everywhere. You'll find out that that's the case if you get into your motor. Otherwise, yeah, it's pretty clean. All this looks really nice. Motor, just everything just spins nice and smooth. I don't have the brushes on yet, so I'm going to go ahead and snap the brushes into place. Okay, so we've got the motor done. Everything's looking clean, very well done. Thing spins well. I've got the brushes seated. Everything still turns as it should. Everything's in the proper position. All my little wire setup that I have is good. There's nothing else binding in the way. So our next test is to run the motor. You noticed that a couple people did their motor runs with the warp motors, and it was pretty loud. I think this one's a little bit quieter, and we have brand new brushes that are not seated at all. It's just straight cut, and again, these brushes are straight on to the commutator. They are not at an angle, so there really isn't going to need to be any more of a run-in time than the other brushes, and we'll see how it runs. I already know it's going to run because I've already started it up. So and there you have it. Things running smooth. And actually not terribly loud. Let me bring the camera in closer and give you a close-up of this. There's the motor. You can see all the connections on it. Give a good sound bite on what it sounds like. Not terribly loud, and it's running. This is the process to get the motor running, get it run in before we actually put it on the car. So I'm not going to do a whole lot of run in right this minute. but we'll get back. I'll get back to this and get this thing to run in a little bit longer. We're going to disconnect it. So there you have a nice rebuilt motor. It's clean. This motor didn't require very much to get it cleaned up, but I did order the parts so we could get the motor going, and that's what we have. It's a clean, strong motor. I took the back fan off that was on here prior to my getting it. The fan works, but I think what I'm going to do is on this end here is I'm going to have a cover built. I'm going to have the shaft stick out, and I'm just going to plumb in external cooling, because I have a really nice fan for cooling, and that gives me lots of extra room in the back. And this motor is really short, so I think we should have no problems fitting it in the Volkswagen, and maybe even doing so without having to cut anything. That's the goal. Being short, that's what we want. The motor is black right now. I was considering turning the motor to make it look pretty like everybody else, but I'm going to kind of buff it up a little bit, and I'm going to paint it black, and we're going to just kind of let it disappear underneath the car. It basically won't be seen that much. I'll show everybody the motor, but it's just going to be a big fat round cylinder. As far as anybody else knows, that's what it is. And they'll go, ooh, because it sure looks a lot different than a gas engine. That's no doubt. So anyway, here's my kostov 11 interpole motor, and ready to break in the brushes and ready to go. And we'll get everything cleaned up, mounted up, and into the Volkswagen. And we'll talk to you later. There is more to come.